They dragged her onto the wooden platform just as the sun dipped low, painting the dusty frontier town in gold and blood-red light. And before a single word was spoken, laughter broke out, sharp and cruel, cutting through the air like broken glass, the auctioneer himself smirking as if the very sight of her was a joke, his voice booming, "Gentlemen, I present to you the one even the brothel wouldn't take," and the crowd roared, some shaking their heads, others spitting into the dirt, and she stood there thin, bruised, wrapped in a torn shawl that did little to hide the marks of a life that had taken everything from her except breath. Her name once Mara, now nothing, just another unwanted thing in a town built on taking. And as men inspected her like damaged goods, whispering that she was cursed, broken, not worth a coin, memories flooded her mind in cruel flashes, her mother's hand slipping from hers in a fever-ridden shack, her father riding out and never returning, the long roads, the cold nights, the false promises that always ended in doors slamming shut. And when she had finally believed she'd reached the bottom, the brothel door had opened only long enough for a woman to look her over and say, "We can't even sell hope on you," before shutting it again. And now here she was, the lowest of the low, auctioned like scrap, while the auctioneer lifted his hammer, joking, "Who'll start the bid, or should we pay you to take her?" And the laughter grew louder, heavier, until Mara closed her eyes, not to escape, but because if she looked any longer, something inside her would finally die. And just as the hammer began to rise, a new sound cut through the mockery, the steady rhythm of boots on wood. Slow, deliberate, not rushed, not drunk, not amused. And when she opened her eyes, she saw him, tall, broad-shouldered, silver star on his chest, dust on his coat, eyes that didn't roam her like a purchase, but rested on her like a question. The sheriff of Briar Creek, a man known for bringing order to places that had forgotten the word. And the crowd quieted, surprised, as he climbed the steps and stood beside her, close enough that she could feel warmth for the first time in years. The auctioneer chuckling nervously, "Now, Sheriff, surely you're not—" But the sheriff raised a hand, not to stop the auction, but to still the cruelty, and he turned to her. Not the crowd, not the chains, not the laughter, and he held out his hand, open, steady, human, and said words that no one there expected. Words that would fracture the moment forever. "Miss, you don't belong up here," and the town murmured, unsure as he then faced the auctioneer, voice calm but carrying like thunder. "Name your price." And the auctioneer laughed again, thinking it a joke, until the sheriff reached into his coat and laid coins on the table, one by one, each clink echoing, until the laughter died. And in that silence, the sheriff said, clear and unshaken, "I'll buy. And if this story has already touched something in you, if you feel that pull in your chest, that need to know what happens when one hand reaches into a pit and refuses to let go, then don't let this moment pass you by. Subscribe to the channel, because some stories aren't just watched. They're felt, and Mara, the girl no one wanted, felt something stir for the first time in years as his fingers gently closed around hers. Not like a chain, but like a promise. The crowd expected him to lead her away like property, to pull her behind him like something owned. But instead, the sheriff stepped down first and helped her descend, slow, careful, as though every plank mattered. And when her foot slipped, he didn't tighten his grip. He steadied her. And that difference, that small mercy, made her breath catch harder than any blow ever had, because cruelty had always rushed. But kindness moved at its own pace, and as they walked through the stunned crowd, whispers followed them like ghosts. Why would he waste his money? She'll only bring trouble. Some things are broken beyond fixing, and Mara believed them. She truly did, because every step felt like walking on a story already written. But the sheriff didn't take her to a cell, didn't take her to a back room, didn't take her anywhere she expected. He took her to the small white building at the edge of town, where the flag creaked in the wind and the door bore the marks of years of protection. And inside, he poured her water before he asked her a single question, watched to make sure her hands stopped shaking before he spoke. And when he finally did, it wasn't, "Where did you come from?" or "What are you worth?" but "What's your name?" And when she whispered it, almost ashamed of it, he nodded like he'd been given something valuable, and said, "Mara, you're free," a word so foreign it almost hurt. And she laughed once brokenly, because freedom had never come with locked doors and guns on walls. But he explained quietly that the law didn't see her as property anymore, that the receipt meant nothing beyond removing her from men who would never see her, and that if she wished, she could walk out that door and never look back. And for a moment she almost did, because hope is terrifying when you've lived on scraps of disappointment. But then he added, "Or you can stay until you remember how to stand, without someone pushing you." And something in her chest collapsed, and the tears she had rationed for years came without permission. Not loud, not dramatic, but unstoppable, soaking into hands that no longer pulled away. And the days that followed were not miracles. They were small, stubborn victories, clean clothes that didn't itch, food that didn't have a price, mornings where sunlight meant beginning instead of survival. And the town didn't soften overnight. Some never did, but the sheriff remained the same, offering work not as punishment but as purpose, teaching her to read notices on the board, trusting her with keys, letting her sit on the steps when the world felt too large, and slowly, quietly, the girl even the brothel had rejected became the woman people nodded to in the street, the one children waved at, the one who planted flowers outside the office where she had once been delivered, like a burden. And one evening, as the sun burned low again, she stood where the platform could be seen in the distance, and the sheriff stood beside her, not in front, not behind, and she realized the price he had paid was never coins. It was reputation, comfort, safety, and he had given it without asking who she had been, only who she might become. And she turned to him and said, "Why?" And he answered simply, "Because someone once did it for me." And that was the moment. Mara understood that rescue is a chain too, but one made of hands, not iron, passed from one broken soul to another until something whole is built. And if you've stayed this long, if this story has made you feel even a fraction of what Mara felt when someone finally saw her, then subscribe to this channel, because here we don't just tell stories about the forgotten. We remind them and you that sometimes the greatest act of defiance in a cruel world is to look at what everyone else rejects and say, without laughing, without fear, without shame, "I'll choose."